Hey everyone, welcome to another Power Monkey podcast. On today's episode, Chad and I interview an absolute legend, Mr. Jeff Martone himself. Jeff is the founder and CEO of Tactical Athlete Training Systems, and he is also considered to be a pioneer and one of the founding fathers of the modern kettlebell movement in the United States. Jeff is an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to kettlebell training. His stories are amazing. If you've never heard him talk before, you're definitely in for a treat here. We talk a little bit about how he got into kettlebell training, the injuries that led up to it, his story when it comes to him getting involved with CrossFit, and how he became SME of kettlebell training for the CrossFit world, and what he's doing now in terms of helping more and more people understand the benefits that come along with kettlebell training. We hope you guys enjoy this one. We know that we can actually do a few more episodes with Jeff because he has so many stories, but this is probably the first of many, so enjoy. All right, we have a very special guest today, Mr. Jeff Martone, the legend himself. I don't really think this is more appropriate than having somebody like Jeff on to say this, but Jeff, you are kind of the epitome of a real legend within our community, and probably epitomize the quote that we hear a lot of people saying, experts saying, I've forgotten more than you'll ever know about a particular topic. And I think that's probably true with your case with kettlebells. So we're going to dive into your history with kettlebells and your history and who you are and how you got to have this legendary status. But first, welcome onto the Power Monkey podcast.
Thanks, Dave.
Of course,
awesome to be here, brother.
So Chad and I were talking a little bit before this, and we thought the direction here would be great just to get a little bit of a background first on you so that our listeners can get a better understanding of who you are, and then dive in a little bit into the kettlebell world. It's such a great piece of apparatus, and I know that you believe a ton in it, and you've been teaching at our Power Monkey camp for a number of years now and passing on the great knowledge to our campers. But can you give a little bit of a background on just you getting into the sport and kind of how that developed?
Sure. All right. It's a great question, man. And it's kind of a long answer to get there, right?
Go for it.
So it's like this. Kettlebells, I'll just say this, then I'll get into the backstory. Without in my opinion, it's probably one of the best shoulder rehab tools you can use. Like anybody's got shoulder issues. And having said that, now I'll backtrack. You know what I mean? Is just typical. Grew up in New England area. Did some wrestling, box, played football, and basically I started having shoulder issues my senior year playing football. I was a starting offensive, defensive tackle. Made All-State that year, but the problem is I dislocated my shoulder like every single game. Every single game, it'd blow out. And then I just kind of pop it back in and keep playing, right? And there's a saying that I picked up over the years is like, if you're going to be stupid, you better be tough. Because being stupid has consequences. And my consequences were pretty much, having surgery right after that season, right? So had surgery thinking, hey, don't really need to go rehab much. I know pretty much everything that I needed to know. And dude, I promptly jacked up my shoulder again. So I dislocated it like before the first surgery, probably a dozen times easy, like 12, like I'd say full dislocations, not including like just that subluxing where it kind of partially comes out. Then, again, man, I'm like my own worst enemy. I still even when I was in the sling, I'd practice jabs, hitting heavy bag, which I can tell you this, man, it's not too wise, to do, after post surgery, and the shock is pretty painful. But anyway, so 2 weeks to the day that I got my arm out of the sling, literally, I went up to visit my brother. I'm not going to get into a lot of stories and stuff like that, but it ended up in a huge free for all, with a bunch of college football players. But anyway, so having said that, so within the course of so the first surgery was in 85. Then I dislocated probably about another, probably another, several times, man. And so I had second surgery in 87, right? Then I blew out my good shoulder in a rugby practice once, and then I dislocated that a couple more times. Then I had surgery on my good shoulder in '89. Right, so '80s, a bad decade for the shoulders, right?
Yeah.
Crap. Sorry, guys. I thought I turned it off.
Well, good.
My bad. Got a couple demerits on that one. So, all right. So, yeah. So surgeries, 85, 87, 89 on that one. So anyway, so that's that. Also, the thing that's kind of interesting is even after 2 surgeries on my right shoulder, it would still dislocate on average, like maybe once a year. Not doing cool action guy stuff. I'm talking like sleeping. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If you're sleeping, arms over my head or something like that, you roll over, bing, it come out. Talk about a rude awakening,
Wow.
And there's sometimes, if I'm sleeping, at home, if I'm home, then my wife, I'd wake her up and, I talk her through how to pop it back in. And then there's times where like I'm like in a hotel room by myself or whatever, man. And, this happened. We were going through the LAPD, ground control course back in the probably early mid 90s. And it was a day before we were supposed to test out. And actually I tested out that morning, I tested out on a Thursday, and I should have been testing out on Friday, but for some reason I was able to test out early, which was like God's grace, because that night I rolled over and blew my shoulder out and I had to like pop it back in. Yeah, man. But that would have sucked to test the next day. But anyway, so I had this ongoing shoulder thing, you know what I mean? And during this whole time frame, like I'm working, I'm training all the time, doing, whether doing tactical stuff, whatever, you know what I mean? Shooting, doing ground control, ground fighting stuff. Then also in the 90s, that was kind of a bad decade for the knees. I had meniscus to take on my right knee twice, blow up my ACL, had that thing reconstructed. And then that's when I started like realizing, maybe I'm off somewhere, you know what I mean? Maybe there's a problem, you know what I mean? And no lie, man, I'm sitting there watching, your legs in that thing that moves it. I'm laying on the couch. And I think this is my opinion, even after the 2 nose surgeries. That's a whole nother topic, man. But
that's a different podcast, right?
Yeah, it could be a different one. And so anyway, so I'm sitting there, and this is God's honest truth, man. I'm sitting there, and this is the other thing too, man. Just I always replay. I'm like, all right, what were the actions prior to me like dislocating something? What was the actions in my attitude prior, me blowing my knee out? What was I doing? And some things, I was overtraining. The common denominator on a lot of things is pride. You know what I mean? Every time I think I'm super Jeff, you know what I mean? And I'm like, doing great or whatever, I get crushed and humbled by the Lord. And that's pretty much how he gets my attention. And I'm like, So I'm sitting there, after all these, with my knee, getting that, just had that reconstructed. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, all right, Lord. I'm like, obviously what I'm doing training wise, it ain't working. You're going to have to show me a better way. So this is probably about 97-ish, 98 maybe. And, and that's the other thing too. My doctor, who I probably put his kids through college, my orthopedic surgeon, dude, I asked him one day, I'm like, hey doc, I'm like, why is it I train like a wild man, you know what I mean? Do all this stuff. And yet, I'm like, it's like my joints are held together by tissue paper. And he's just like, well, Jeff, could be genetics, could be this, could be that. And I'm just sitting there like, bro, you just tell me you don't know, because you're just blowing smoke my way right now. But knowing what I know now, it's like, dude, it makes perfect sense. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't doing, multi-joint exercises, things like that. Yeah, I was doing a lot of cows, great, you know what I mean, and all that. But I wasn't doing things really to tighten up the connective tissue, doing stuff like I'm doing now. And you guys, look at you two guys. You both you guys are world class. You know what I mean? And everything you do, like, dude. And I always knew this too, man. I'm like, dude. I'm like, who's stronger than gymnasts, man? It did 2 things: gymnastics and Olympic weightlifting. I'm like, look, you know what I mean? And so which kind of brings me back to like the injuries And I remember this clear as day. And this was like, now, dude, this is this. I was in 7th or 8th grade. My dad took us up to the high school weight room, and this is like in the 70s, right? So, and I remember, and this is when that universal machine first came out. And he says this. He's like, hey, this is the newest thing, this, that, the other thing. You know what I mean? It's what everybody's training on. Then in this other room was this guy named. He was like true weightlifter, you know, this guy Rocky Saki, and he's short, stocky, you know what I mean, built like a weightlifter. And he goes, dude, knowing what I know today, man, I'm still kicking myself in the rear end, because he's like, do you want to go in there and train with Rocky, or you want to train here? Because this is what everybody's doing now. And I'm like, and I didn't know any different, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh yeah, we'll try out the universal. Boom! What a mistake, you know what I mean? I'm like, dude. It's like, yeah, my life could have been so different. But anyway, I had a lot more character building in store for me, right?
See that? So, Chad, he just missed out on a path down Olympic weightlifting, just opening up the wrong door. See that?
It's so sad. So sad. But yeah, like you said, it led you to where you are today. So maybe it was a good choice in the end.
Yeah, you know, you can't go backwards, you know.
So late 90s, had this little revelation of saying, there's got to be something better out there. How can I get the idea of building connective tissue, I think, is so important. And it's one of the things that, you know, we stress endlessly with both our weightlifting and gymnastics backgrounds. Yep. And for you, you found your route towards building that through Kettlebell. Is that right? Right at the end of the 90s. Now, what was that moment in terms of that switch? How did that happen?
I'll tell you exactly how it happened. So this is like before Kettlebells came out, right? And literally, I'm getting ready to change jobs. I was at a law enforcement training academy in Albuquerque, you know, and we trained like other trainers. That was kind of the deal. And then basically I was going back to this. They're switching another group I was with. They're moving their recruit training, their academy out to the Fort Smith, Arkansas area, and out of Fort Chaffee. So anyway, a buddy of mine I used to work with, he's like, hey, Jeff, you want to go, you know what I mean? Because I at this point, I want to go back east. I was in Albuquerque for like 10 years. Bro, it was nice. But I kind of want to, yeah, as you get kids, you want to get back to the east. You know what I mean? Where your family's at. So anyway, so he's like, yeah. He goes, so I'm like, yeah, man, I'll do that. It'll be fun. And plus now you're not working on the trainer level, you're working on the recruit level. And so they picked me up doing PT and DT, right? You know, physical training and defensive tactics, plus, you know, the shooting and other stuff too. But that was the main thing. That was the primary on the defensive tactics and physical fitness. So literally the weekend before we were going to pop smoke, we were going to leave Albuquerque. Dude, this lady walks by. I was teaching a class, and she's like, "Hey, have you ever heard this guy?" And he's going to be in here doing a seminar this weekend. He's going to be in Albuquerque. I'm like, and I look, and it was Pavel Satsouline, right? Mm-hmm. And this is like who, like, you know, a couple of years, you know, later ends up introducing kettlebells to the U.S. And I've read articles on Pavel. I had a stretching, he had some, you know, beyond stretching video, some other stuff. But this particular course that he was teaching was on strength training. You know what I mean? How to get super strong with like doing 2 exercises, like military press, deadlift. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go check that out. So I went down there, you know what I mean? Me and a buddy of mine, and, you know, hung out for, you know, a couple hours, trained, bought his book. Then I took off. Then I went to, moved to, you know, Fort Smith. So now I'll check this out, right? So now I'm running the recruit physical training program. Now, we were just kind of going along with the old school curriculum, which, you know, you got your running, you got your cows, you got your pull-ups, just the basic stuff. And we had like no building, no nothing. And so it was fine, you know what I mean? And here's the thing, it's like, so me and another instructor, before we do PT with the guys, right? And I just got off my knee injury, man. I was like all messed up. You know what I mean? It was like, yeah, it's just everything was hurting, you know what I mean? And so before we did, you know, the cows and led PT with the guys, you know, me and my buddy Randy, we do, you know, deadlifts and do pretty much heavy presses. Then we throw in some get-ups with a dumbbell because there's no kettlebells at that point. And so that was it, you know what I mean? And dude, and this is, you fast forward now, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Is is like, I forget, it was maybe a 22-week program around week 16. Now we're in the tactical phase of training, right? So tactical, now you're like geared up, you're you know, shooting, moving, communicating, whatever, zipping through the woods, doing your thing, right? So like us as instructors, we played at opposition force. So we end up, if you're doing like what they call basic landing training, as an instructor, you cover twice as much ground as students, just the way it is, because you constantly running guys through. So here's the deal. What I noticed is on break, you know what I mean, I'm hanging out drinking water with my training partner, and we're sitting there like looking at the guys that are way younger than us, that got phenomenal backgrounds, just got out of the military and all this other stuff. And dude, these guys were like wrecked. You know what I mean? It's like on paper, their push-ups are better, their run times are better, all their pull-ups, everything was better. So on paper, it looks like our PT program's like really working. But in reality is, once you got the gear on, once you start doing all this stuff, once, you know what I mean, they get to the objective area, they weren't so much ready to fight, you know, they're more ready to throw up, you know what I mean? So for doing job performance, it wasn't working out. And, you know, and everybody's like, oh, I got different injuries, hamstring pulls, whatever. I look at my buddy, man, I'm like, dude, how you feeling? He's like, oh, I'm feeling great. He's like, what about you? Dude, I'm feeling fresh as a daisy. My knees weren't bothering me, back wasn't bothering me. Everything was like, I'm like, I think we're on something with this, you know what I mean, with this functional training or whatever. So based on that, you know what I mean, when that class was over, I called Pavel up. I'm like, hey, man, you got anything else going on? You know, any other type of training? He was doing some other training with some other law enforcement agency. And so I went down there, did that. Then I'm like, hey, can you set up like an instructor course? Like, and he set up another one out in Santa Fe, which was like 4 instructors. Again, this is before kettlebells came out. And it's like, dude, so he put together this 5-day program, going through all the stuff, which is good. And then at the end of that, he's like, I'm like, dude, is there anything else? You know what I mean? What else do the Russians do? You know what I mean? He's like, well, he's like, there's this thing called a kettlebell. I'm like, what's that? And so this is probably 2000 right now.
Wait, so I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So he wasn't teaching kettlebell stuff at that time?
No.
What were you guys using Pavel for at the time in terms of this was just strength training, like program, a lot of functional fitness, a lot of more body weight stuff?
That's it, man. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right.
Strength training, because you just using it like his protocol. Like, I mean, dude, we're using sandbags, you know, lifting like kegs, you know, things like that, doing weighted pull-ups, weighted dips, that type of stuff, you know, and some functional cal type stuff.
And at that time, there was no introduction to any kettlebell in the States at all, right? It was just not a piece of apparatus that was really used.
No, it was nothing. No, yeah. It was absolutely nothing, right? So now he tells me, he's like, hey, about the kettlebell, I'm like, what's that? Then he explains it. Then he literally hands me his copy, like for the his copy of the, whatever it's called at the time, and the Russian Kettlebell Challenge DVD. It was his copy that he was editing or whatever. So he's like, hey man, this is, you know, you can take it home, look at it, whatever. So I look at it, man. So it's him demonstrating all the exercises. And again, they weren't even manufacturing kettlebells yet. You know what I mean? And so dude, so I got one of my backup skills was blacksmithing, because I always said, like, the day, like when I was having all these injuries, I always said, the day I can't lead by example for the guys I train, is the day I need to change careers. You know what I mean? And prior to meeting Pavel, honestly, that day was approaching pretty quick. You know what I mean? And so there was a guy who was one of the top blacksmiths like in the world, who had a school literally like 5 miles down the street from me where I lived in the mountains in Albuquerque. And so dude, so I got these blacksmithing skills. So
Jeff, that's a whole other episode. You're a blacksmith as well. These are skills that we never knew about. This is definitely, we got to have a part 2 for sure.
So I made some homemade kettlebells and started messing around with it. You know what I mean? And so then Pavel, in I think it was like spring of 2001, he had the first his first actual kettlebell course. And Dragon Door started making kettlebells, and me and another buddy from work went out there, went through his instructor course. Then we actually were the first federal agency to adopt kettlebell training into our recruit training. And this is it, man. And this is like, for anything I do in life, here's the litmus test. It's like, if it works, I keep it. If it doesn't work, I get rid of it. You know what I mean? You know, and it's like that way. If it's like a shooting technique, tactic, or anything like that, dude, if you can show me something that's better, you know what I mean, I'm all about it. I'll ditch whatever I was doing, you know what I mean? And so I don't have emotional attachment to the kettlebell or nothing. It's just like, it just so happened, you know what I mean? It totally like rehab my lower back, rehab my shoulders, you know what I mean? And the same thing for the guys that I've trained. And so as we started implementing kettlebells, all the functional fitness stuff, the injuries went down and your performance went up, you know, which is what more can you ask for, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And this is before I even, now this is, you guys get a kick out of this, right? So they're like, hey, Jeff, they're like, we need to build a gym, right? Like for our guys now, right? And they're giving us money, but Bob, we're going to build a gym. And they're like, we'll build it however you want. I'm like, all right. So this is it. So I never even heard of CrossFit yet, right? So this is what I came up with. I'm like, hey, and this is like before like Tyler Haas was making his rings or anything like that. I'm like, hey, you know, this is what we need to do. I go, we need to get some Olympic weightlifting platforms. I'm like, we need to get some bump plates to do Olympic weight. Dude, I don't know jack about Olympic weightlifting, you know what I mean? I'm like, but man, we need to get some platforms. I'm like, we need to get some rings. We need to do like some gymnastics. Dude, I'm no gymnast, you know what I mean? And as I lay it all out, you know what I mean? Kettlebells, this, that, the other thing. It was honestly, it was a little over the top for our management to really wrap their head around, you know what I mean? And somehow I got vetoed and they wanted to buy some machines and stuff. And I'm like, you know what I mean? Then I got another job.
Ahead of your time, Jeff. I mean, that's basically, I think we might have found the real originator of CrossFit right there, who just got turned down.
No.
We're able to get it funded.
No, man. It's just, you know what? And this is it, right? So a buddy of mine, so now I'm training at this place called Direct Action Resource Center. I'm now employed with them because, you know, for whatever, man, I just needed a break doing the other stuff. And dude, so I had Pavel come out and a buddy of mine actually hasn't come through the course yet, Power Monkey Camp, Jimmy Waddell. Jimmy's, he worked for an agency and he's retired now. But anyway, dude, he's like grappler, no neck. He's pretty thick, dude. And he's like, you know, when we're done with the course, you know, he's like, hey man, did you ever hear of CrossFit? I'm like, no. And I think he just came back from like, you know, he was doing something with Greg. And this is right before like, he might have went to the very first level one that Greg ever had, or he went out there to train with Greg and says, hey, you know what? If you want to work with military law enforcement, you got to have like a curriculum. You know what I mean? You guys need a certificate and this and that. So Jimmy's like, so he tried to like tell me about CrossFit. He's like, hey man, get on the website. Well, dude, I'm not the most tech savvy guy, so I couldn't even figure it out, man. You know, and all their exercises got different names, and I couldn't get the videos working. I'm like, he's like, look, he's like, they're gonna have, and actually, he goes, they're gonna have a, you know, whatever level one or whatever they're calling it. Then he goes in Colorado at the Highway Patrol Academy. Why don't you come on out? I'm like, roger that. So I went out there and, you know, met Coach Glassman, went through, and Chris Summers was doing the gymnastics back then. Dude, it was like a bunch of dudes who presented there, like old school guys, like Mark Twight, Dan John, whatever. And
what year was this, Jeff?
Dude, this is probably, I'd say maybe 04.
04,
yeah,
okay.
October 04 maybe.
Okay.
Wow. Maybe 03, but I'm thinking 04. And it, you know, and the whole time I was there, I'm like, thinking like, you know, and Coach asked me, he's like, hey, what do you think? I'm like, man, this is exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, but obviously they're like light years ahead in the programming and everything else, you know what I mean? But, yeah, so, you know, that was that, you know, and, yeah, I loved it, man. I think
so you, from that point on, you were like, all right, I'm in with CrossFit. I know kettlebells can actually be incredibly useful. No,
nothing like that. No, man, because when I go take a course, I just go take a course. You know what I mean? And I don't see, you know, and Greg knew through Jimmy that, you know, I did kettlebells, and you know, because at this point I was a senior instructor for Pavel, so I did kettlebell courses. You know, I was one of his main instructors and stuff, and so Greg knew that, and but it's kind of funny in that time frame. There's like, for some reason, the kettlebell community kind of had a little angst. There's like angst between CrossFitters and kettlebell community for whatever reason. I don't know, man. But you know what I mean. But dude, you know, I love CrossFit, and I love the concept, you know, and So then maybe a year later, maybe 05-ish, I had a little falling out, and I resigned from doing kettlebell stuff with Pablo and Dragon Door. And dude, then Coach Glassman calls me up. He's like, hey, he goes, heard you had, you're no longer, working with Dragon Door and Pablo and stuff. I'm like, nah. And he's like, hey, I just want to welcome you to the CrossFit community. I want you to be our kettlebell guy. I'm like, thanks, Coach.
Now, Jeff, when you went to that first CrossFit course, were they teaching kettlebell stuff in there yet? Were they using a kettlebell at all?
They were. I don't remember if I don't remember if they were teaching the swing then. But I know for a fact that, and I want to say it's the 2000, I know they were using kettlebells because I want to say the 2002 CrossFit Journal, they had an article on how to do the American swing. You know what I mean? And yeah, so it was kind of like that.
Is it, I heard something about Glassman, and I never knew this. Glassman or somebody within CrossFit invented the American swing. Is that true?
Well, okay. That's a great question. Excuse me. So yeah, I say it's like this, man. Functional movement's functional movement. So this is kind of, as far as, Greg, I would say I give him credit that he invented the American swing. And I'll give you the full story on this because it's kind of interesting, because even to this day in the kettlebell community, for whatever reason, they bash on CrossFit taking the kettlebell overhead in the American swing. They're like, oh, it's bad for your shoulders, it causes this problem, this, that, the other thing. And it doesn't, you know what I mean? And so I'll kind of give you full circle on this. So during that time frame, like say 02, because in the 02, 03 time frame, when like Coach Glassman, has a keen eye for talent, and he's looking like, all right, man, who's the best I could pull for gymnastics? Who's the best I could pull for Olympic weightlifting? Who's the best I could pull, for all these different modalities? And so he's reached out to, to Pablo, and reached out to other guys in the kettlebell community. And for whatever reason, nobody was really kind of interested in CrossFit or interested in that. And like I said, and this is during the early days of people doing the online, not the online, but, the chats and whatever. And everybody's like, everybody's a tough guy on that. And again, there's a lot of mean things said towards CrossFit and this and that, like they don't know what they're doing, this and that, and finally coach is like, you know what? It's like, screw that Russian stuff. He goes, we're going to take that, kettlebell, and, he does his, the mathematical, whatever power equation, take away greater distance. In American swing, you are moving that weight at a greater distance, and therefore you get a little more work out of it. You know what I mean? And he goes, screw it, and he called it the American swing, right? And it just kind of to spite the Russian kettlebell community at the time in the U.S. and which I find pretty humorous, right? And so now the reality is like way coach was teaching, and the way it was in the journal. It was a super long movement. And this is like before the standards came out for the games. So it was like is really like, it'd go really deep. It's almost like, it wasn't so much a hip hinge like we teach it now. So it was a little more front squat oriented, I guess. Then it went, obviously overhead. And then when coach asked me, to teach the kettlebell program, I'm like, hey coach, everything kettlebell lifting, there's a hip hinge to it, so I'm just going to modify, the American swing. And he's like, yeah, right on, Jeff. He didn't care, you know what I mean? And so that was that. And but the thing that's really funny is years later, now we're probably talking, started getting to Kettlebell Sport, which is a total different animal, right? It's like I want to say it was 2010. I was over in Russia, St. Petersburg, and the guy who became my coach, Coach Sergey Rudnev, I'm over there, I'm watching him warm up. This guy's got world-class records, man. He's a small guy, former gymnast, and you think he wrestled and stuff too. And the guy's an unbelievable athlete, and dude, and he puts up crazy numbers in weights. And I'm watching him warm up, and no lie, man, he's doing what we call American swing. At this point, I know he knew nothing of CrossFit, never seen CrossFit. You know what I mean? He lives in, Siberia. and flat out, man, he's like, and I'm sitting there watching, I'm like, look at that. I'm like, the American swing in Russia. I'm like, how ironic. And so when he's all done, I'm like, hey, coach, I'm like, why are you doing that particular movement? He's like, oh man, it's a great movement to kind of warm up my joints, warm up my shoulders, this and that. And that's it. You know what I mean? And so I just started laughing, man. I'm like, that's great. You know?
So he was using it specifically as a warm up, and basically nobody else was using it at the time. In fact, in the community, it was kind of looked down upon.
Well, it's looked down upon in the American kettlebell community. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, the American, because there's a difference. And here's the thing. And again, man, just you can use kettlebells to get strong, no doubt. Like Pavel is like wicked smart. He's very, very, very strong, very flexible. I mean, he's like flexible like you, Dave. You know what I mean? Like gymnastic, crazy flexibility. And but his background's like really more like in powerlifting, things like that. And so everything like he does kettlebell wise is more, is more strength oriented, right? Sport, man, is like a different animal, man. That's like almost like to itself. It's like where it's when I first started getting into it, I didn't realize it's actually an endurance sport. It's a cyclical sport. So you're doing like, say, instead of doing, here's an example. Like one of the standards for that Paul would use, it's known now as a Secret Service snatch test, because the guys from Secret Service adopted it. Some of their instructors down there in Maryland, and good dudes. And it was like this: they had to do 200 snatches with a 24 kg, but you could switch hands as much as you want, and which is legit. You know what I mean? That's legit. And so that's what they do, right? So it's 100 snatches. No, scratch that. 200 snatches, as many hand switches you want, and I believe it was in 10 minutes.
Did it have to be 100 on each side, or
no,
you just had to complete?
Not necessarily. I mean, it probably ended up that way just because guys try to keep it symmetric.
Mm-hmm.
But doing as many hand switches as you want, kind of gives your grip a break, right? Mm-hmm. In sport, right? And this is the thing: is like it's the same thing. Okay, 200 snatches. But in that 10-minute time frame, only one hand switch. So, bro, now you're doing, the exact same way, with one hand switch. And your technique for that, the breathing, all the little nuances, man, because now that's like flat out endurance, man. And so it's very different that way. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And you got to be way more technical. And that's the other thing too, is knowing, like when I first started seeing sport and watching the guys from Russia, and I'm like, man, those guys kind of move different. You know what I mean? Move different than what, way I was taught here in the States. Then I'm like, I wonder why that is. You know what I mean? And I was never really even attracted to doing the sport because I'm like, oh, that'd be a good way to blow my shoulder out. You know what I mean? Because I'll have a number fixed in my head and just be a knucklehead. You know what I mean? And just go until the sun comes apart. But it's not that way, man. Because of flexibility, joint prep, all the stuff that they do, because it is a sport unto itself, is like, dude, they're very scientific on how they go their approach. And that's how, because I had no lie, Sergey Rudnev is probably, there's Sergey Rudnev, Sergey Rachinsky, Denis Vasilyev. Those guys are like, I've trained all of them. Those guys are world class. And dude, the only reason I got as good as I got in sport starting at 45, 46 years old with multiple shoulder, you know what I mean? Dude, I have nothing anatomically anchoring this right shoulder in place. The only thing that's keeping it together is like a little, stabilized muscles that I developed through kettlebell training and having good technique. Technique is everything. Everything. So,
Jeff, can you talk really quickly, because I want to just touch a little bit more on the sports side, because I think some people just maybe don't know about it. I think it's glossed over a little bit. We talk a lot about the technical side, its application to CrossFit community, but kettlebell as a sport is kind of unique. I was for a number of years when I started coaching at a CrossFit gym in New York City in Queens, the owner of the gym was a Russian guy, Vadim Noskov, who owned CrossFit LIC. And he was a huge proponent of kettlebells. And he used to host a lot of CrossFit kettlebell competitions at the gym over the years. And that was kind of my introduction into seeing that kettlebell as a sport was a thing. And, you have North American records in the long cycle and things like that. And I think it's just interesting for people to see that what that actually is and how it's different maybe than its application to just strength and its application to a CrossFit workout. Can you talk about what those competitions kind of look like and what you participated in specifically?
Sure. And dude, I talk about Vadim. Like, I know Vadim well. I mean, I love that guy.
Yeah.
And actually, I competed like at his gym. That's where I got Master of Sport long cycle, was at his gym. I mean, he had coach, Rudneff, everybody there. I mean, yeah, man, it's a great place. So here's the deal, man. So sport, the first time, okay, it's a 10-minute sport, right? It's classified as a cyclical sport, right? Just like running, rowing, cycling, cross-country skiing, or whatever, you know what I mean? So it's an endurance sport, right? So basically, traditional, you got two. You got long cycle, which is your clean and jerk, right? It's a continuous clean and jerk. You could pause in the rack, or you could pause overhead, or you cannot put the weights down. And that's the only place you can pause, is either in the rack, where it's on your chest, or it's overhead. You can't have them hanging by your side or anything like that. So you got like platforms all set up. Each one, has like, you got a judge, like a legit judge in front of each platform. They're counting for you. You know what I mean? You got a LED screen that you can keep count of your reps and stuff. So basically, you got 10 minutes, right? So you got to pace yourself. It's all about pacing. And for Master of Sport, and there's all weight classes and stuff like that. So for me, like, I first started competing in long cycle using 24 kilos, which is fine, you know what I mean? But to really get up the ranking system, you got to use because I was competing in the open division, you need to use the 32s, right? So after my second trip to Russia, I took 2 trips there, did two like, I don't know, 7 to 8 training camps or whatever. And that's when it was only after that I decided, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to try the sport thing. Because my technique was good enough and my flexibility, everything was getting better. But I knew I was going to hurt myself. So that's it, man. So you start off, boom. Once you start, that's it. You got to get your breathing, get your reps. You can't, if you try to move like your hair's on fire, dude, you're going to burn out. And that's it. And once you put the weights down, you're done. You know what I mean? If it falls out of your hand, you're done, and that's it, and it's funny. It's like, because I have a good coach and he like, every week I'd have to send him a video. He sends me like exactly what to do, and I do exactly what he tells me to do, you know what I mean? And dude, and I end up doing pretty well with it. And the way I used to set up is kind of funny, man. Like Vadim's gym, Long Island City, like when I got, so I set up a CrossFit. Anytime I know there's a competition coming up and I'm going to be at that competition, I set up a CrossFit kettlebell
seminar,
course like nearby. So I was at Keith Winston's gym. So I'm like, so I wake up, go over to Keith's gym, teach everybody the American swing. Then by that time, I'm like, all right, I'm out. You know what I mean? And I took a cab. Keith takes over. You know what I mean? And so I get over there, and that's it, man. So I ended up getting, I needed 60 reps with the 32s. I got in 10 minutes, and I got 62. So
nice,
amazing.
That was,
yeah.
That was tough. That was no joke tough.
I'm totally new to this. Again, I might have been there when you were doing it because I helped put down the.
Dude, you could have been.
I put down the floor spaces for the competition when Vadim used to host them. But 10 minutes to do clean jerk with the 24 or the 32, depending on what group you're in. And it's basically just nonstop. You can rest in the rack, you can rest overhead, and it's just max number of reps that you can hit in 10 minutes. That's it. That's insane.
Sounds brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
I'm telling you, it's tough, man. So what I so to get your head wrapped around it, I tell people, I'm like, all right, man, just picture like, okay, like the CrossFit workout grace, right? Okay, let's just stick with 30 as a number. Try to grab 2 kettlebells. I don't care. You grab 16 kilos, 24 kilos. It doesn't matter to me. Just kind of get a feel for it and try to run 30 unbroken. See how that feels.
Yeah.
Then it's like, but I'm telling you though, and again, man, and it's interesting because the breathing techniques, everything that I learned in sport that, that makes you successful is later on, me and Zach we're teaching that in the CrossFit community. Then it's interesting. You hear the same thing now that like how important is, any of the top athletes when they talk about pacing, when they talk about breathing, So the carryover is just phenomenal. And the thing is, like for me, and this is because people say, "Oh, Jeff, why don't you be in CrossFit?" I'll tell you why I don't. You know what I mean? Because dude, it's like doing pull-ups. There's so many things that would blow my shoulder out. You know what I mean? Which I just know. You know what I mean? It's just like I could do strict weighted pull-ups. I built up where I could do strict weighted pull-ups with my body weight plus I think my max, definitely 106 pounds. I can knock out singles. Again, man, it's not in the CrossFit world. It's not that great. For a guy who doesn't have a shoulder that's anatomically anchored, man, it's all right. You know what I mean? And but it's just doing like rep after rep, and especially and I don't have the technique like I say any of you guys, Dave, when it comes to like and I was thinking about that too, man. Like it's like because my shoulder's feeling great last Power Monkey camp, and I'm watching. I mean, it's the best it ever felt, and I'm watching do his thing on the rings, watching the bars and everything else going on there, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, I'm gonna recircle back and get this down. Then I tweak my shoulder in a kettlebell.
Oh man,
I'm like, come on, man.
Seems to always work out that way.
Jeff, hearing you talk about explain the differences that you were seeing in sport versus what was going on just for strength training or definitely in CrossFit. Obviously, it sounds exactly the same way as me looking at weightlifters on the elite level in the Olympics or the World Championships versus what you see on a regular basis, and especially a number of years ago, people doing CrossFit. And the thing is, you circled back around there in the end, and you said, now what I learned from sport is now being more noticed just with people doing kettlebells randomly, right? And it's the same thing. I've heard so many people in CrossFit, for example, say, well, it's in CrossFit, it's just a different task. Weightlifting is just a different task than it is on the elite level. And it doesn't have to be. And to me, it shouldn't be. And I never thought that it should be. Like you should, if as a CrossFitter or anyone that's doing Olympic lifting for any reason, slow, fast, whatever it is, you should pay attention to how the elite lifters are moving because they've done it for a long time and they've figured something out, right? They've figured out tricks to help them move better, more efficiently, more effectively. And so I love hearing you, give that rundown and that example of what you learned in sport versus just what you were seeing and doing before and what a lot of other people do as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and same thing, Chad. I mean, dude, how do you know you're getting better in, obviously in Olympic weightlifting, right? It's just like, dude, and correct me. It's like, correct me if I'm wrong. It's like, dude, as you're going up in weight, I mean, it's still like, dude, it should be like, it's that effortless power. If your technique style, then like it should be, you know what I mean? Right. Boom. But if you're off, you're off, you know what I mean? And whereas with lighter weight, you could be off all the time and you're never getting better, but you know what I mean? And I don't know, dude, technique's everything. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, people just get happy with the way that they're moving and the same old weights that they're lifting, you know what I'm saying? And they just chalk it up as a different task or their potential or their mobility limitations, whatever other excuses that people give. And like, hey, you've got a lot more room that you can grow if you just do a little bit of work and learn some technique and work on your mobility and stuff like that. And, that being said, I think that goes along with what you've mentioned being in Russia a couple of times. Was that your major motivation? What kind of landed you in Russia a couple of times? You said you were at some kettlebell courses and stuff like that, but were you going over there to to get more information to bring back to the U.S. as a teacher, to be better as an athlete? What was the major motivation there?
The main motivation, is to be a better athlete, right? Is to really get to the bottom of what's the truth, what's the most effective way to use the kettlebell. These guys are putting up crazy numbers, and if you look at them, they're not very big guys. You know what I mean? They're they're different weight classes, no doubt. But dude, like, I'm like, it's just always, to me, I look at it this way. It's just like the human body's not capable of perfection, so there's always room for improvement, right? And we know that, the fundamentals, the basics, if mastery in any sport, mastery of the fundamentals is critical. So I'm like, all right, what am I missing? You know what I mean? How can I get better? So I always look at it like, from a personal standpoint, then it's like, then once, I'm like, dude, if I could do it, anybody can do it. You know what I mean? And that was it. And I was really blessed to work with the top coaches and constantly learn, get better, and pass that along, and to make people move better. You know what I mean? And keep them from hurting themselves.
Sure. And it sounds like you were maybe the first ever online video review client. I think you were talking about sending videos. Were you sending videos to your Russian coach at that time?
Yeah. That was challenging.
Again, Jeff, you're way ahead of your time there.
Oh no, like he was talking me through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're like mailing VHS tapes.
Close.
Sending fax messages as well. Yeah.
Oh man.
So what's going on now, Jeff? You have, Tactical Athlete. Can you tell us a little bit about what Tactical Athlete is and Kettlebell RX and things like that, and how you're using kettlebell to kind of like take it to the masses and bring it to more people?
Yeah. So Tactical Athlete is a company I started back in, I don't know, 03. And basically it's a very familiar term, general used term now. You know what I mean? But I'm not saying, I coined it, but I did. You know what I mean? And this is why. And it's funny, the guys, the old guys, I mean, they'll verify it. You know what I mean? It's just like, because here's the thing. When I was back, doing that recruit training, right? I'm looking at these guys that just got out of the military, and and again, man, they're doing the old school running, cows, whatever. And then I'm thinking, I'm like, you guys know, it's like the way you think, determines everything. It's like, so if you don't consider yourself an athlete, then chances are you're not training like an athlete. How's the athlete really trained? And it's funny, like during that time frame in law enforcement, even the military, like they were kind of, really had what's the word, man? Almost like two paradigms. It's like you had your runners for cardio, they run, and they're like, skinny guys, you load up weight on them and kind of crush them, a little bit, you know what I mean? But they're good for running very in a straight line. Then you had guys that weren't really doing strength training, but they're doing more bodybuilding. Dude, and if they're really big into bodybuilding, anybody's, been in military, law enforcement, whatever, and if they don't have an athletic background, dude, those are the first guys to fall out because they're not getting their 8 scientifically balanced meals. They're not getting their 12 hours of sleep or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, dude, they just fall apart. And, a lot of the guys can't. And I'm not broad brushing saying can't throw a punch or anything, or crack an egg with one, but it just is what it is. You know what I mean? That was my experience, you know what I mean? So I'm sitting there, I'm like, guys, what's more athletic than being in law enforcement or doing paramilitary type operations? You know what I mean? It's like, dude, you got to think like an athlete. You got to be able to, you know what I mean? You got to be able to overcome obstacles. And the thing is, you got to overcome obstacles. When you get to the fight, like, you know what I mean? And I could give real life examples of guys I know that literally had to almost like sprint almost a mile, get their rifle out of a gun bag and take a shot on dude. You know what I mean? And it's like stuff like that. It's like, or, you know what I mean? You can't be so exhausted, or something like how many guys end up getting killed because they gas out. You know what I mean? They get the gun taken away from them. Boom. And that's that. You know what I mean? So it's like, so it's that having people starting to think like an athlete, not a bodybuilder, not a long distance runner, but like, dude, be more athletic,
Mm-hmm.
And, so that was that, you know what I mean? And, cause I just, so the whole goal is, my wife's like, what's the goal of this company, Jeff? I go, honestly, babe, I go, all I want is the good guys to be able to crush bad guys and not get winded or injured during that process,
Yeah.
That is a great thought process, though, of treating, soldiers as athletes and giving them the tools that they need to be able to succeed during, the most stressful situations that they're going to be up, facing. So I think that strategy is absolutely appropriate in terms of treating them like an athlete. I think that works.
Yeah.
So I'm at home. I want to buy some kettlebells. What does the average person need in terms of kettlebells? I mean, you go to a gym and you see 400 different weights. You see ones the size of, peas. You see ones that are size of someone's torso. CrossFit makes ones that are over 200 pounds, things like. What's the average person need? Because I think everybody should have a kettlebell. I think it's incredibly important to have, especially if you're at home right now training. But what would be an optimal thing to have in terms of best usage at home?
I would say for a guy, you could go. I'd say you go as light as a 12 kilo, right? And personally, I don't think you need to go heavier than 24 kilo. I mean, if I know in CrossFit they use the 30, 36 a lot, and it just depends what you want. I mean, now, as I was saying, now I'm thinking more like endurance. You know what I mean? Like, now for your swings, for your cleans, for your snatches, I think those are great working weights like that. For female, I would say 8 kg to maybe like 16 kg. And granted, and again, there's girls, in competition, they're doing 24 kilos and they're smoking it. You know what I mean? But for the average female, I'd say 8 to 16 kg. For guys, I'd say 12, 24 kg. Now if you got a shoulder issue and if you want to build strength, you know what I mean? Hey man, rock on, go heavier, like, especially like Turkish get-ups, do the arm bar stretch, Turkish get-up. That will make your shoulders stronger. That actually make your whole body stronger. And that was one of the major exercises that actually rehab my shoulder, keeps it from dislocating. And that is working on heavy Turkish get-ups. And when I say heavy, and again, man, you want to be progressive with it, but like an old time goal was old timers used to do get-ups with a 100-pound dumbbell.
Wow.
I built myself up where I could do. It gets awkward after 106-pound kettlebell. It's a lot of weight on your arm. If you go to, honestly, start lifting people, little kids, you know what I mean? It's a lot easier on your arm, you know what I mean? And you could get strong with that, man. There's these guys I've trained that, dude, they lift, females. My known max is my jiu-jitsu instructor. I think he's how was he, 145? Dude, it was tough, man. It was tough.
Nice. So if you got kids, don't worry about buying kettlebells. Just use your kids until.
Just use your kids.
If you keep using them, and you're just going to get stronger and stronger as they grow, I guess. But Jeff,
dude,
that's exactly
I was
going to say,
right.
would you say it's critical for people to have 2 of each size that they have, or is there plenty to do with just one arm?
It depends on your budget. Ultimately, it's a really good idea to get 2 of everything. And an easy way, if you're kind of short on budget, get like, see, you go, okay, I'm gonna get a 16. Let's say you're gonna get a 12 and a 16, right? So get a 12 and a 16, then maybe get 2 12s, you know what I mean, and 1 16.
Right.
Then as you start feeling good with all that, then get another 16, then get, either 20 or 24. You know what I mean? You can kind of, you can build up. Yeah. Because there's benefits to both. If you're training with 1 kettlebell, it's very asymmetric and it works your body differently than when you're working with 2. 2 is very, now working with 2, and you guys know the deal, man. It's like, especially with CrossFitters, it's funny. It's like, from a technical training, like historical, like Kettlebell Sport, there was like 1 kettlebell and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. But which is correct. But I find that even when we train, that's how we train it. When we train CrossFitters, people at the Power Monkey Camp and stuff like that. But it's funny to me, like how comfortable CrossFitters are doing the 2 kettlebells. You know, I'm like 2, you know, because they're used to doing Olympic weightlifting. You know what I mean? Everything's nice and balanced. Boom, boom, boom. You know, as long as you're not smashing your fingers, everything's good.
Yeah.
Can we direct people, Jeff? I know for a while you were attempting. I mean, you're with your blacksmith skills. You're making your own kettlebells still. Are you doing that? Can we direct people to buy your specific kettlebells? Are they up and running now?
Well, I was going to ask as well before you go too far there if you actually have those first kettlebells that you made and how heavy were those?
I'll have to show you pictures sometime. I made I made one out of a bowling ball, right? And I forged a steel handle on it, and I put some lead in it, and that was like one. Actually, I made it for my wife, and so it looked cool, man, because it was like the size of like a 30, 32 kilo, you know what I mean? But it was obviously lighter. Then dude, then I made these heavy ones out of this cut round steel. Like I'm talking, they're like, I think each one's like 110 pounds. It's like ridiculous. And it's like, yeah, man, like if you ever drop that thing, like the way, you know, because it's round, it's a cylinder. And dude, so the edges are kind of sharp. Like I was practicing, I had them in a hotel room, man. And I was like practicing these bench presses and dude, and I always get close to the bed. So if I need to ditch it, I just toss it on the bed. You know what I mean? Cause I don't want to I'm on the 2nd or 3rd floor. And dude, anyway, man, I don't know. Something went awry and it hit the carpet. And man, dude, it cut like a semicircle hole in it. I'm like, dang it. You know?
You're carrying 100-pound kettlebells around with you on trips? You put them in your suitcase?
I know. We're driving. I don't know what we're doing.
So are you making your own right now still, or is that not fully ready yet?
I'm still in the process, Dave. I wish I could say they're ready for sale, but
soon enough.
Soon enough, yes.
So Jeff, we're getting to the end of the podcast here, and I know that we could have a part 2, part 3. We could probably have you on a regular guest with all the stories that you have in there. But before we get going, we just got a last few questions for you, 2 or 3, and then we'll get you out of here.
All right,
First one is, what sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics? And this is one, Chad, that I'm not quite sure where he's going to go with, but
I'm not. I'm scared though. I'm not sure, but
what do you think?
Which one do I personally prefer?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. It's like I honestly suck at both of them equally. You know what I mean? And there's more things in gymnastics to suck at. You know what I mean? And but no, with the Olympic lifting. Dude, honestly, I love them both. You know what I mean? And I'm not good at either one. You know what I mean? I've taken, a lot of instruction, but I really need to put more time in both. And actually, it's funny you say that because this shoulder tweak that I recently have, and I'll just be like up front, man. It's like, dude, I'm like Dave. I'm like, I've been working the bucket circles. You know what I mean?
Really?
My friend. Yes.
Nice.
Oh
yes.
my God. Nice. We got to get that set up at camp again. We can get you doing that. Amazing.
Dude, yeah, absolutely, man. Dude, I'm like, because I'm thinking, what can strengthen that? You know what I mean? And so I've been working it, man. I've been working it. And hopefully next time I see it, man, I won't look like a,
We'll get you on the gymnastics mushroom next. You'll be doing level 4 routines like Dan Pope. I love it.
Maybe.
We'll take that as a diplomatic answer. Is that a diplomatic
answer? Before he talks, go ahead.
I need I want to get with you, Chad, for, again, man, this fortify the back, my brother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For Olympic weightlifting. Sure. That's where I know I'm weak in some spots,
Well, I was just going to say, I think I'm going to take the fact that you've done, millions of clean and jerks with the kettlebell as a win for weightlifting. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, probably so.
That's I'm taking some liberties with an answer.
See, I talked him into it. There's a check for weightlifting. By the way, I'm way behind Dave on this. The gymnastics is, most people pick gymnastics, so you got to give me this one for sure.
You got it. All right, Jeff, next quick question here. Any specific person that you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast? Anybody that you would recommend?
Well, Zach. Zach's good if you want to talk kettlebells or really anything cross. He has a pretty diverse background.
Absolutely.
I
think having you and Zach on together would be a great one, because I think he pulls some stories out of you that sometimes we miss out on. So maybe we'll try to get both of you guys back on together.
Dave, we could get a good 5-hour recording out of that one. There's no doubt about that. That'd be great.
Yeah, we'd probably have some fun with that. I'll give it some more thought, man. Like more like fitness oriented or what?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Just anybody that you think would be interesting to hear from.
Dude, George Ryan. George Ryan would be a good one. And the reason I say that is because, one, he's still active duty for LAPD, you know what I mean? And he squared away, man. He was on the SWAT team forever. He did the CrossFit striking, phenomenal. He was my corner man when I did that Masters boxing deal. And George he's very articulate, very well spoken. Yeah, man, he's got some. He's known. He's got some good stories.
Awesome.
I'm trying to think. Well,
that works. We could definitely put him on the agenda to reach out to.
Yeah, and Zach for sure.
Yeah, Zach. Yeah. Hey, before we go, man, I'll answer any other questions.
Yeah. Last couple questions, and then we'll get you out of here for sure. Do you prefer reading a book, watching a movie, a documentary, or a TV series?
I'd say probably. I do a lot of reading. I read a lot of books and listen to a lot of audiobooks, man. Like when I'm driving and stuff. Okay. So, yeah, I don't really. Go ahead, bro.
I was just going to say, do you have a good recommendation, something that you've listened to or read here lately that'd be good for the audience?
Yeah. The Dan Crenshaw's book, dude. It's, give me a second, man. I'll tell you exactly what the title. I want to say it's Resilient, but it may not be.
Is it Fortitude?
Fortitude, yes.
Yeah.
Dan Crenshaw. Look at you, Dave.
Yeah,
Fortitude. That was a really good one. Yeah, I think the audience would really enjoy that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
We got to put that on our book list as well, Chad. We got so many books now that we got to follow through on.
You know what? We got such a long list. I think we need to write those down somewhere or create a list and put them on the Power Monkey Fitness website.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Podcast recommended books and stuff like that. I think people would like that. Plus, I need something to look at. I can't remember them all at this point, so I need to go check that list as well. But Jeff, man, it's always a pleasure to see you, to talk to you, to hear stories, and I look forward to hearing more and talking to you more, of course, at camp. And like Dave said, plenty of other recordings that we could have you on as well. Before we get off here, do you have any parting words for the listeners?
That's a good question. I was going to joke, say, there's this old comedian, and I'll give you something real, you know what I mean? But there's this guy, he did this spiel on boxing, you know what I mean? And, these 3 things that make you a good boxer. He's like, train every day, get a good nickname, and train every day. These 3 things, Right. But really it's just, mastery of the fundamentals is really the big thing. Doesn't take talent to be consistent, and that's it, man. You just get out there, be consistent, and you'll get better, and that's it, man. I mean, it's good times.
Awesome. That's great, Jeff. I love.
Last quote is a Zig Ziglar quote. It says, "You don't have to be great to start. You just got to start to be great."
Right.
And so.
Right.
Love it.
Those little quotes that you give out, and you wrote some stuff in an email as we were talking before this that just so powerful, and like you said, doesn't take talent to be consistent. That pretty much sums up everything to me right there. That's incredibly powerful, a powerful statement. Hopefully the listeners will take that in and shake that around in their head a little bit and think on it for a little while and really try to hold true to that. But those are all great quotes. Love them. And to our listeners out there, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.